So let's talk about Jung, because as of this morning we had 235 subscribers around the world, and that's up from 199 when 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I mean, since September 24th, we've increased by 2.5 hours a day that's being listened to.
Wow.
Okay, and it's just been incredible what the growth of the video website has been.
Love it.
And so, anyway, okay.
Congratulations on your success.
Notwithstanding the fact that we have a small group here, we have a large group out here, and so we want to respect their interests also. Okay, so we've been talking about Answer to Job, which is Jung's most controversial book, and we're into paragraphs 662 to 687. I just want to mention an experience I'm having, which is I'm reading Answer to Job, and as I'm reading it and also editing it, so I'm watching myself read it multiple times, right, because I have to go back and cut sentences and so on where I have a small speech impediment, and so every so often in the middle of the sentence I'll just say and so I have to go back and reread it, and so but I've been having religious experiences by reading it out loud. Okay, by reading it out loud. Plus, I have been, let's say it's so complex that when your unconscious starts to work with it, it just is overwhelmed, okay? And it's something like a hypnotic induction. And I actually asked the president of the Maryland Psychological Association today, because she happens to be in a meditation group I'm in, I said, can you hypnotize yourself? And she said, oh yeah, people hypnotize themselves all the time. That's what meditation is, among other things. And so I said, okay, that's interesting. But the experience I've had now 3 times is I'm reading this book, and all of a sudden I go, crunch, and I just literally, I go to sleep. And so it's the most bizarre thing to be looking at this video of myself, and all of a sudden I go.
You have like dreams?
Yeah, sure.
Vivid ones? Or?
Yes, definitely. I have a lot of dreams. So anyway, it's a very intense and complex book. Okay, each paragraph has stuff in it. So what I want to go back and mention here is that the basic theme is the differentiation and transformation of the God-Image in history. It's the evolution of the psyche. Okay, and the basic idea, Job's encounter with Yahweh is followed by an activation of the collective unconscious by virtue of Job's profound conscious insight into the nature of the deity. The God-Image feels obliged to move closer to humankind, to come up out of the depths of the deep unconscious so some or all can see it. The God-Image is the most basic archetype, the deepest layer. The basic objective of the psyche overall is to fulfill this constellated archetype. Now, this is what both Jung and Edward Edinger wrote this book, Transformation of the God-Image by Edward Edinger. And so Transformation of the God-Image is 10 lectures by Edward Edinger on Answer to Job. And Edinger was a founder of the C.G. Jung Institute in New York City. And later moved to LA, and it was in LA that he started to give all these lectures. And he actually gave lectures on 4 major Jungian books. And so what he's saying is the God image is coming up out of the deep unconscious. And understand, when they're talking about the God image, they are talking about an archetype. They're not talking about God in the metaphysical sense. Okay? And in some way I see the method in their madness, because they did not want to get into a fight, or at least Jung didn't want to get into a fight with theologians during his lifetime until he wrote this book. He knew when he wrote this book there was going to be hell to pay, and there was hell to pay.
Was he Catholic?
He was Protestant. Okay, and his father was a Swiss Reformed pastor, so he was basically, from the Western Europe point of view, a Presbyterian, right? Okay, and so his father and many men in his ancestry were Swiss Reformed pastors, and so he was raised up in the church, right? And so he said, you know, I'm looking at all of this basically as a psychiatrist. He was a psychiatrist. He said, I'm looking at this from a psychological point of view. Okay, and so he was realizing that he could read art, and including sculpture and painting and all art, music, everything, and also writing as evidence of where someone was in their psyche, right? And so, for example, he was sort of distressed when he started to see the surrealist Kandinsky and who's the famous one who did the Last Supper?
The Last Supper? Da Vinci?
Huh?
Da Vinci?
No, the later one.
Oh, Salvador.
Salvador Dali. Okay, so Dali.
Oh, I see.
So the surrealists came along in the teens, the 19 teens and 20s, and they were becoming very surreal, and he was very distressed by that, because he said that, you know, that was indicative of what was going on in the deep unconscious at that time.
Collective.
In the collective unconscious at that time. And it's artists who are like the canaries in the coal mine who let you know that this is happening.
Yes.
Right? And it's not designers, I acknowledge, it's the artists. But on the other hand, I mean, if I'm the creative person, but I can't draw a straight line, for example, in my book, which is called Political Psychology, New Ideas for Activists, in that book, I had ideas for the imagery for that book, but I couldn't draw it. And so I explained the ideas to my designers, and they executed it. Okay? But who's the artist then? You know, I guess I'm the artist, because I'm the one that recognized that there was a political, a social, and a psychological, something implicit in each one of those images. Okay, and you know, for example, one of the images is a cauldron, and that cauldron, which implies alchemy, right? So it implies alchemy, but in the cauldron are floating around, you know, an airplane, a church, a mosque, a woman, a symbol for woman, a symbol for man, and various other symbols that implicitly involve everything. And then there's smoke coming up out of the cauldron, and in that smoke is this fat cat who has a cigar,
Yeah.
and he's the political aspect of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no way my designer could have thunked that one up.
Well,
Right.
the artist is never anybody, it's always the unconscious.
Right, okay, it's always the unconscious, it's not the artist. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
And so it was, so I was the artist with respect to that, you would say.
No, your unconscious was.
Or my unconscious, okay, fair enough. Okay, so my unconscious was the artist.
But you know, it's such a mix. I mean, there's no hard lines anywhere.
Yeah, but then my designers executed it. But they executed it to my satisfaction. But something had to come out of their unconscious too. I mean, I explained to them what I wanted in principle. But then, you know, when they came back with this thing, it blew my mind, it blew me away.
Well, they had to pick up on what you were giving them.
I have a question.
Right.
If the artist is unconscious, then you spend most of your time making art, then what does that really mean for your state of consciousness?
It means that your unconsciousness is becoming conscious, so you're becoming conscious in the
Through your art.
Yeah,
through
and
the art.
Is that like
It's
an evolution of the psyche kind of thing? Or?
it's an evolution of your psyche.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they're helping you to become conscious, right? So Salvador Dali and Kandinsky helped Jung and others become conscious of what was going on in the collective unconscious.
Wow.
What was going on in the collective unconscious at the time of World War I, right? And also at the time of World War II.
You mentioned World War I, and it reminds me of Yeats and the poem The Second Coming, which is a personal favorite.
Yeah.
I don't have a favorite poem, but when it comes to something like that, in that kind of creative realm, that's definitely my favorite poem. And I have it memorized if you want.
What poem is that?
The Second Coming.
I highly recommend reading
Yeats?
it. Yeats.
Yeah.
He said he would tap into what they call the Spiritist Monday. Maybe he just called it that.
Yeah.
It's like this global intelligence.
Well, literally
World intelligence. Yeah. Forgive my precision of
Yeah,
language.
collective unconscious. So here we're talking about the collective unconscious as it was coming up in about 1600 BC. Okay, because Job, the events of Job occurred about then.